It's haunting to think that this has been going on for years and people don't believe the stories that the abductees have talked about, from Betty and Barney Hill and beyond. This is where we hear of the abduction cases and what happened. People saying that they had been laying in their beds at night, something has come in, something takes them out into space on a craft somewhere, they do experiments. I mean, these stories are numerous, but many times they were seen as sensational. But now the DIA and the Pentagon and all these other groups are leaking these documents saying that it's all true. It happened. They're not denying it. And so I'm sure many of you that have had these experiences are afraid to speak up. You're afraid because you may be asked to take a psych evaluation. But now the whole idea of vindicating abductees is now something that I think is in the works. Especially when you hear a report like that on Fox News. Brett Baer, who's a very credible reporter, did such a great job in reporting this. It was haunting to hear those reports. It was like, this is part of the disclosure situation. This is something that they're telling us right on the news, and we're being distracted by war. We're being distracted by abortion, and we're being distracted by all these other things. But the real news story is that people who have been in contact with UFOs or aliens or whatever you want to call them, they have had changes in their biological makeup, their DNA. They have gotten sick. Let's go to Al Franklin in California. Hey, Al Franklin, you're on Ground Zero.
Good afternoon, good evening, Clyde. How you doing tonight?
Doing great, man.
Yeah, I'll try to make this brief. This story is true, every word of it. 1972, I was in the Army. I was going home for leave, and I missed my flight from San Francisco to the end of California. It's a small college town.
Right.
And so my friends came from Eureka and drove up and picked me up in San Francisco. So we were driving back that night. As we drove down the road and we were going through an open area, it was a bright light in a farmland kind of area. We drove by it, but it was so bright, it was white. It was piercing white. So we stopped and we backed up. And we pulled up. We were looking at the light. It was oval shaped. Mm-hmm. And it was floating just a little bit off of the ground. And we couldn't really make out what it was, but we were going to get out. That was our plan. But I remember we walked to the fence, mm-hmm. and I had my foot on the fence, and I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden, some little white bubbles, but they were big size. They started coming toward us. And next thing I remember, I'm sitting in the back seat of the car, and the windows are all foggy. And we drove, and we went to Eureka. And that night was really, really crazy, Clyde. I don't even want to tell you what happened, but it was really freaky.
Freaky in what way? Tell us what happened. What happened?
It was a lot of sexual stuff that happened. One of them was my girlfriend, and with her friends, I knew one of them. The other ones I didn't know. And like it was like wild cats, and like it's just doing all kind of stuff. And next morning everybody was kind of embarrassed. We hadn't planned that. We never talked about that ever again. About 5 years later, we're in L.A. I'm out the Army. We're sitting at a friend's house, and we're sitting on a hill. We could see an airplane flying going toward LAX, and it was bright. And the light hit it a certain kind of way. And it just made me think. I said, hey, you guys, you remember that night? And da-da-da-da. And they all, like, everybody, like, it knew what we were talking about. And we talked about it that night. And we all came up with the same conclusion, that our life was never the same and it was always different. And we went through everybody had a story to tell. It's like we were all on our own journey. Some people went to Europe, other people went to Africa. You know, I went on my entertainment trip, and we all had a chance to come back and talk about it, and that's what's the truth, and we don't have no answers about it. But I always, and I'll say this, and I'll let it go, I always felt that it was somebody else with me for a long time.
And they were somehow watching over you, and that after that encounter, you all of a sudden just felt you went wild with each other, and you didn't know why. It was unexplainable.
Unexplainable.
Wow.
But even after that, I felt like consciously I was sharing a space with somebody.
But somebody was with
you. I know
you.
that sounds crazy.
A walk-in.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Al, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight. Yeah, I mean, just the idea that you acted differently after you've had the encounter is also something that happens. And there have been so many stories that I've heard. I remember there was a young boy and his mother were in a car, and the aliens showed up, and he was angry at his mother. We had a session with him on the air, and he was angry at his mother because the aliens took her away from him, and he felt abandoned by her. And that even though the aliens were playing with him, he even remembers them rolling him up into a ball and throwing him around like a baseball. He said it was really bizarre that they were able to mold him like that. Stories like that sound so outrageous, and yet now when you're reading these documents, they don't sound so outrageous anymore. There may have been, and I would say, due to this document's been released, an alien abduction program, a biological experiment that was carried out on human beings that had been going on from the 1950s through the 1980s. These documents prove it. Many people out there have had these stories, they haven't been able to tell them.